Well, hello there, friends, and welcome once again to another episode of the 360 Experience podcast. I'm your host, Tim Braheem, and today is my first episode from my new recording studio at my second home in Costa Rica. So it's very exciting for me to be here. And what's even more exciting is that I will be having a conversation today with the number one loan originator in the United States, Shant Banosian. This promises to be full of value. We're talking about a guy who has done as many as 2,000 loans in 1 year. He's still having outstanding months here in 2024. In fact, he is currently on pace to do over $1 billion of production just in the calendar year of 2024 alone. We're going to talk about his origins and the importance of his origins, both from a familial perspective and also how he got started in the mortgage business and some of the things that he needed to overcome to achieve the success that he's at. We're going to talk about referral partners and the value that he brings to them and the importance of confidence and how to build that confidence so you can be referable, as he puts it. So sit back, get ready to take some notes. And before we continue, I just want to say thank you very much for your subscribership to this podcast. It's how I get people like Shant to be able to be on the show. And if you could forward this along to anybody that you think would find value from it, that would be wonderful. If you're not currently a subscriber, please do subscribe and please comment and give us likes if you like what we're doing here. And without further ado, friends, my conversation with Shant Banosian. How are you, man? It's nice to see you.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Truly my pleasure. I'm happy to be here, excited to chat today. And I'll recharge, ready to go after July 4th here.
Yeah, did you have a nice holiday?
It was awesome. Spent it in Cape Cod with my wife and my kids, and it was awesome.
How many kids you got?
I got 3 little daughters, almost 12 next week, 9-year-old daughter, and then an almost 6-year-old this week. So it's got some birthdays to celebrate in the next 10 days.
Yeah, those are great ages to they're starting to get active and wanting to do fun things with dad, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're awesome. I have very, very active girls. They're always trying to max out the fun. So got my hands full.
Yeah, well, I bet you have your hands full, not just because of that, but because of the amount of business that you do, which obviously we want to hit on that in a big way. I mentioned in the intro that I met you for the first time back in early June in Las Vegas. I really appreciated your presentation very much. And I think what I appreciated the most about it was just how humble you are. Like when I met you at the gym that morning, came up and introduced myself, and you're just a real guy. And I really like that a lot about you, and you're very approachable. So I'd like to unpack. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, you're the number one loan originator in the United States. I mean, with that comes more questions than I have time to ask. But I'm going to try to get started by starting at the beginning if we can. So how long have you been in the business for? And you know, where did you start? Were you a broker? Were you a banker? I mean, tell us a little bit about the origin story real quick.
Yeah. So I fell into this business by accident. I had a friend that was doing it in 2003. I had freshly graduated from college. I was thinking about kind of what I was going to do in my career, and I was working in the nightclub business for a brief amount of time in the city of Boston. And I ran into a buddy during the daytime because when you're in the nightclub business, you're like a vampire, right? And so I ran into a friend at the gym, and he told me what he was doing, and I got into so I was like, it sounds like a great thing. And I ultimately ended up working at a subprime mortgage company called Champion Mortgage. They were out of New Jersey, and I was working in their call center in Massachusetts. And it was a great place to start because the lead channel that I was fortunate to fall into was their internet lead sources. And it was like, I was back in the days of like lendingtree.com, lowermybills.com, and all the other different lead aggregators out there. Why I say I was lucky to do it is like immediately I had to learn how to connect with people on the phone. And then I had to learn how to differentiate myself amongst the 5 or 12 or 15 other lenders that, my clients were talking to. So I and it was what was great about it was they were a place in the sense that they taught you the mortgage business. So like I was really kind of lucky to have a great foundation where they taught me about credit, income, assets, guidelines, all these things, right? To just learn them. And then they also taught us how to, communicate our value proposition, how to build trust, and even just like how to work. So I got really lucky that the first place I worked at was just like an amazing place to work at. Unfortunately, it was very short lived. It was, just a few years later that, they were acquired by a much bigger company. And then, the whole thing kind of disappeared in 2000, late 2007. So I was left kind of literally by that point, fast forward a few years had gone by. I was actually the top loan officer there pretty much like within the first year of the company on the internet lead sources. And then I got promoted where I was running a sales team and eventually a call center. And, they laid off everybody in one day. So I'm, just about 25, 26 years old, call it. And I'm having to, lay off, almost 50 people in my region at that point. Not really prepared to do that, at that age. Right. But did it anyways. And then I was left without like a job, right, in an industry that wasn't really hiring. So I was able to use my contacts from that company and pretty much beg our way into convincing another company called Superior Mortgage to let me open up a branch here in Massachusetts with having no experience. Like I didn't know, if you're familiar with the subprime world, for anybody that's watching this, like, you don't deal in the world of rate sheets and DU and LP and all these, like, you're literally like, you have like two products to sell. Right. And so like, I didn't really know the mortgage business. I was just like a really good salesperson, hard worker. But I had so much to learn. I convinced this company to let us open up their branch. But their condition was that I had to move to New Jersey effectively for like 3 months or 6 months or however long it took for them to convince themselves that we were like, okay. So I literally got in my car every single Monday morning or Sunday night and drove to northern New Jersey. I would find a hotel room for as cheap as I could possibly find it and work there till Friday and then drive home on the weekends back to Massachusetts. And I did that from, pretty much from like it ended up being like 3 or 4 months. And finally they were like, all right, you guys know what you're doing. And then we had to open up an office from scratch, funded ourselves and then the fun started and it was a grind. This was 2008 at that point. And, I'd come from a world where I didn't have any need for partners, right? Like it was all just lead based. So like I had to open up a mortgage company in the middle of 2008 with no realtor friends, no attorney friends, no, really no network. And I had to go out and build it. And I did. And it was a grind. Like the first year, I don't think we made any money, because we just kept reinvesting in the business. And then the second year, finally started making some dough. I think in my first year, I did about $9 million in fundings. And I think in year two, I ramped it all the way up to like, I think just about 20 million. And then once we started cooking after that, but it was like an amazing run from the beginning from 2003 to kind of working in that subprime world to opening up like effectively like my career on this side of the mortgage business effectively started in the beginning of 2008. And, I'm thankful for all of it because like I am who I am today because of my start and what I learned from those days. And I can tell you that those experiences in 2008, 2009 really helped me over the last couple of years, kind of keep things in perspective, keep my mindset right, knowing kind of having some experience to look back on, knowing what works in challenging markets and like how to thrive when others are kind of like reeling a little bit. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, Tim, but that's kind of how I got started. It was really like my start was almost like 5 years. It was like 2 different starts I had.
It's a great answer, and there's a lot to unpack. And I want to hit on some things that you said that I think are incredibly important for people to hear. So I don't want to take for granted that everybody really gleaned the nuggets out of what you just shared, but there's a lot of wisdom in that. I guess my question was: did you break out in hives? Because when you went to New Jersey, you were close to Yankee Stadium, and as a Red Sox fan, that must have been a little bit too close for comfort.
It was, but fortunately. But this was like right as like I was living in New Jersey and New York and all these places like right as the Red Sox were breaking that curse.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of like really be there at a fun time when all that stuff was going down. So yeah, it was. But I still have a lot of really really good friends in those areas that I still stay in touch with. So it was a lot of fun.
So let's unpack a couple of things. It's really fascinating. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with Julia Wykes and Scott Bertone, who are the two coaches that have been working with me for over a decade now in my coaching program. And I shared with them in our weekly huddle. I said, I've now interviewed yet another person, and this person was Sam Rosenblatt, who his podcast is airing on July 15th. Sammy's, he's not your production numbers, but Sammy does 500-600 loans a year. Okay, so he does some big time volume. He's a beast. And I'm starting to notice a pattern with him, now with you, with Ryan Grant, with me. We all started in call centers. And I think there's something to be discussed here. So I actually didn't start in a call center per se, but I developed my own call center. My third year in the business, we developed a telemarketing operation, and I would just take direct transfer leads from the telemarketers right into my headset. And I used to call it floor time on speed. It was like, talk about accelerating yourself through the learning curve rapidly. Everything that you articulated was exactly what I had experienced as well, which is that I got a lot of at-bats. I had to figure out how to sell against my competition. And I had to know product. I had to counter objections. After a while, you've heard every objection you could possibly get, and then you know how to counter them. But it's a common denominator that I'm seeing in successful originators is that many of them started in this environment where they were, required to just get really good on the phone, and they didn't develop the bad habits. When you get into the business, as you know, and times are too good, you kind of think that the business is about just picking the low-hanging fruit and waiting for your phone to ring. But you and I and several others started in an environment where we had to actively engage people consistently. So I know the subprime world pretty well. I used to do some subprime loans, probably not as many as you, but you were selling negative AM, LIBORs, and all that kind of stuff, and had to figure out how to promote that kind of product. So an interesting thing that I'd like you to comment on. So Dave Gallegos, who is a good friend of mine, who was in Vegas speaking at the same event as us, he was on the panel. He had said to me one time in a conversation we were having, he said, what would it be like if a loan officer's job description when they started was like any other employee, where it's like, look, here's your scripts, here's the phone numbers. Your job is to make, let's say, 6 hours worth of calls a day, 5 days a week. Like, what would happen if that were all you knew? If that was really the requirement? Like, how good would you be? And how much more quickly would we weed out the people who weren't meant for this job? So I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what you learned during that time and what advice you might have for originators right now who don't have enough phone calls to take or to make, and what you would be doing if you were them, if they're doing 1 or 2 loans a month right now.
Yeah, no, it's great. I agree with you 100%. You nailed it. Like, there's a bunch of, I know, I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of, the top 10, top 20 loan originators in the country pretty well. And a lot of them, it's eerie how many of them have the same background, coming from those call center environments that they kind of grew up on leads. And I think there's a reason why that was a recipe for success. I have zero call reluctance. I have zero problem being proactive all day long. In fact, all I do all day is make outbound calls, to my clients, to my partners. If things go wrong, I have no problem jumping on the phone. What I see from the people that are doing 1 or 2 loans a day versus the people that are doing, a lot of loans, whether it's, and however you define that, right, is people that do 1 or 2 loans a day, a month, are extremely difficult to get a hold of. The most successful loan officers in the world are some of the easiest people to get a hold of. You call them, they call you back right away, they pick up, you text them, they text you right back. It's not hard. And I think a lot of that comes from that kind of that mentality that you have, that you just have to make things happen. So to answer your question, there's a lot of things that I learned back then. One, business doesn't just happen. Your activity definitely determines the amount of success. Even if you're not the most talented or most articulate, if you just make a lot of calls, you will do it in business. Next, people do have to like you and trust you to do business with you, and you have a certain amount of time to build that like and trust. Next is you have to have a plan going into every single phone call. Much like you do anything else, you have to have your intro, you have to have how you kind of set the script. You have to have the meat and potatoes of the call. You have to have your close, you just kind of have to direct the call the whole way with your clients. One, because they want to be given instruction. When you go into the doctor's office, the doctor runs the show, the nurses run the show, right? They don't let you dictate how the call is going to go or how the meeting is going to go, right? Same thing with any other professional. So you have to set the table for like, here's what's going to happen from hello to goodbye. They respect that. And that's another way you can build like and trust. You have to be able to articulate, why you're good at why you're good at what you do, like how you differentiate from all the other people that are going to call them, why you're special. Like you have to be able to get comfortable communicating that. Some people aren't good at telling people like, here's why you should work with me. Here's all the things I bring to the table. You have to be good at that. Like in that world, especially in today's world, like you have to be able to self-promote in a way without like sounding inauthentic or sounding like a salesperson, right? So there's a lot of those things that I learned. So like the scripting, I think was very important. The building, the like and the trust, and just getting to know people on a human level, like that's very important. Having structure to the call, and then just like ultimately like not, and then just being able to being comfortable, just getting on the phone with whoever, whenever, whether it's the morning, night, whenever there's an issue, when it's proactive, reactive, like all those things are very, very important. So yeah, that was like that foundational experience I had. And that's why I kind of brought that up at the beginning. Like I was so lucky to have started there, and it just fit. Like I knew immediately, Tim, like when I got there, like within a week, I was like, this is it for me. Like, this is like, I love this. This works for me. And when I transitioned from 2000, call it like 2008 into like a retail, from like a call center subprime world to a retail LO, like in that first year, I didn't know anything else. So like while I was going out and hustling and going to networking events, doing meetings one-on-one with people, building my network, I was actually still like, I was buying leads. Like I remember like literally like my second week, I literally gave LendingTree like $10,000 on my credit card. It was like my max limit. I was like, all right, here's my lead buy for the month. Like, let's go for it. And it was like, my credit card was maxed out immediately, but that's how we started. And so I did that while I was kind of getting up and running. And then within about a year, I didn't have to buy leads anymore. And keep in mind, that was like in a market where like, not only did I only do call center and subprime, I also only did refis. Like I didn't know purchase. Like I didn't know what Fannie Mae was, Freddie Mac was. I didn't know like all this stuff. Like, so like I had to learn the purchase model, and I had to build my network as well. So I relied on that. And, there's still people out there doing business with leads. Like, I'm not one of those people that believe like business should be done one way or the other. Like there's so many different ways to go out and cultivate business, whether it's through networking, whether it's through lead acquisition, whether it's through social media. Like you just have to do whatever works for you and your personality and what's authentic to you and what you think you're going to be able to go after and hustle at and believe in. But whatever that is, I can't tell you.
So I want to string together some important things that you've shared here and give you a quick break, which is number one, you got in your car and you drove and spent, the entire week working in another city to create your future and to create your own breaks. I want to understand in a moment where that comes from, or if you've been able to identify where that drive comes from. Number two, you put your own back against the wall and you treated your business like it was a business. And you said, I'm going to reinvest into buying leads with LendingTree and stroke checks for $10,000 because I'm building something here. And eventually I'll be able to shut the spigot off and stop having to reinvest into my business. But I need at-bats. I need deals. From those deals, I'm going to meet people. They're going to refer me to people. Every deal I do is going to have other people that I'm going to meet, especially if it's a purchase, and it's going to give me opportunities. I'm going to build momentum, build confidence, build experience, learn product, learn how to structure deals, learn how to counter objections. The more opportunities you get, team that is listening to this conversation, the better you're going to get, and you're going to accelerate yourself through the learning curve. How many loans, just quick question, and then I have two other more significant questions. How many loans do you do right now? We're in 2024. What's your year-to-date loan fundings?
We've had a good run. So we're up over 400 million. We're closing in on 500 million for the year. So last month they did about 95 million in fundings. The month before we did about 109 million. This month we're going to be back up over 100 million in fundings. Obviously, predominantly purchase. We're not doing. Fortunately, we're not doing more refis, but it's like 95% purchase volume. Most of my business is in the Northeast. Although I am licensed in all 50 states, most of it is generating from here, but I've been able to kind of expand my business all over the country, mostly through networking and just, I've closed, at this point, 40,000 mortgages, in my career. And so, the reason why I went out and got all those licenses everywhere is because, all my clients have friends, they have family, they're all moving, all across the country and buying homes everywhere. And I just wanted to be easy to refer. I didn't want them to have to wonder, where is Shant, where is Shant licensed? I wanted to eliminate that as any friction. And, and so then I do business with loan officers that aren't licensed in a lot of places. I do business with realtors as their clients are moving out of state, even though they can't help them. A lot of times they'll put me in touch with them. So it's made me a lot easier to refer. It was obviously a big investment in both of time and money, but I'm so glad I did that. But yeah, so I mean, look, my goal is
how many loans have you done this year, units wise?
Units wise, I honestly I should have been prepared with that question. But my average loan size is call it 600,000 year to date. So
but done about 8 or 900 units already this year.
Yeah, it's been a good run. I mean, we've been hanging right around. We're constantly always over 100 units a month. I'll be honest with you. I don't live my week. I'm not in the reports, looking at where I'm at year to date. I'm literally looking at it month by month by month by month. And generally speaking, I even break it down week by week by week. So I'm not really I'm keeping score weekly and monthly, not a tally. I'm sure I could run a report for you and give you exact details in a second, but I know we're somewhere between 400 and 500 million.
Every time I ask you a question, you give me an answer. I've got 5 more questions, so I'm gonna bounce around a little bit here. So I do have a few more that are in the backlog here that I want to get to, but let's talk about what you just said there. So what's the reason that you don't get caught up in the annual numbers and you're looking at it as granular as week by week? I have a sense that there's some wisdom in there that you want to share.
Yeah, totally. One is, I found it to be super distracting. I don't when I was looking at in the past, there was times, it's been years, by the way, since I've been like that, where I'd constantly be looking at the leaderboards and where I'm at month to date. And I was comparing myself to all these other people. And frankly, that comparison was just a distraction for me. If there was a week where somebody that I didn't think was at my level, had a better week than me, it would totally screw me up and it would throw my mindset off. And so so that's it. Frankly, the only person I'm competing with is myself. And I know what it takes to have success on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. So when I create my plan, my goals, all that kind of stuff, as long as I stick to those, we'll be okay. And then frankly, when we're looking at things weekly, we have a whole set of metrics that we cover on a weekly basis. I threw them up on the board when we were at Mastermind, and I have them right here in front of me. I just grabbed the sheet, but if I don't hit a certain metric, there's a reason why that we didn't hit those numbers for the week, whether it's locks or leads or whatever. And then we discuss hey, what do we have to do to get our leads back up next week? Or why is this trend happening for, what's working and what's not working? And so but when you start looking at things 6 months in, it's too hard to pinpoint things. Whereas if you're looking at things weekly and monthly, you can really pinpoint what your activities and actions have been and why the results are what they are. Whereas it's too hard to do that over a large period of time. So there was 2 reasons for it. It was one, the business nature of just being focused on what is causing the result right now. And then 2, not being mentally distracted. It's no different than when you're scrolling on social media and you see everybody's fake perfect life, right? And you're kind of feeling oh, how come I don't have that? Whereas they don't have that either. It's just, you're seeing what you want them to see. And so with that, I just stopped comparing myself. I find out where I stood every year at the end of the year when Scotsman's comes out, and then I think about it for 30 seconds. Usually we're happy about it, celebrate, but then we get back to work. There's not a lot of you don't see me posting a lot about it. I'm very grateful, proud of everything we've accomplished, but we're kind of always on to the next thing and moving forward. So we should probably celebrate our successes a little bit more. And we try to do that, but we're always just in it.
So I think that there's something incredibly important that you shared there, though, by breaking it down into a weekly, much more granular purview that you're looking at. you can see things in that shorter window that you wouldn't be able to see if you looked at it over, say, a quarterly or a semi-annual or an annual period of time. And what I heard you say is that you've isolated certain metrics that you know to be incredibly important, leads, locks, et cetera. And by looking at it through that short window, you can see if something has fallen off and you can course correct, and you guys can get together as a team and go, hey, look what the numbers are telling us here. And what do we need to do to get our numbers back up? So, okay, you referenced the importance of being able to answer the question of why is it that I want to work with you? So why do I want to work with you?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's two different people I'm answering that question for. You've got my consumer, right? Like my client that's trusting me with their home purchase, and then there's the realtor, right? Or whatever kind of partner you work with. For the consumers, right? Like to me, one, like, now my answer is different than it was a couple of years ago, right? Now I've done this 40,000 times. I'm a expert. I'm obsessed with what I do, and I've got your back 1,000%. I know what the obstacles and challenges you're facing in this market is, whether it's affordability, whether it's how challenging it is to win. And I've got all the solutions for that. And I'm always going to be available to you. I'm going to make sure you're prepared, empowered, confident throughout this home search, which can be overwhelming and challenging. I'm going to be the one that's the quarterback between your realtor, your attorney, your title company. I'm just like, I'm your person. Like I only win if you win, and I'm obsessed with winning, and I'm obsessed with you winning. So like, like I get much more granular in terms of like, I'll explain kind of like, who we are, what we bring to the table, our access, our availability, all the little things that we do to help them stand out in a very competitive market. Because everybody's markets are competitive. Everybody thinks their market's the most competitive. I do know I work in one of the most competitive markets in the country, right? And so like I've changed a lot of our systems and our processes in order to help our clients win, because like they're competing with very, very, very qualified people. A lot of times they're competing with cash. So like they need to do everything they can to stand out. And I have the solutions, right? So like they have obstacles and challenges. I have solutions, as simple as it is. From my realtor part.
Real quick, I just want to comment that I think that there's some real importance there in being confident in yourself. Yeah. And that's not something that just you're born with in most cases. But there's a real attractiveness for a referral partner and or a borrower when you can say to them, look, I'm really good at what I do, and not in an arrogant way, but like in a confident and humble way, which is what I just heard you articulate there. So I hope everybody's taking note of that. And don't forget what Shant said at the beginning of this conversation. In those early days when he was at that call center, he got a tremendous amount of experience in structuring loans. That's what built his confidence. He had to figure out over and over and over again when he'd lose a deal, how to get another deal that was similar. And that's the type of stuff that only comes from working hard, that only comes from being in the trenches, having the day-to-day experience. And that's why it's so important to do a lot of loans, because when you get a lot of at-bats, you get a lot of opportunities, you figure things out, you start to grow and build the confidence in you. And then you have the ability to speak in a humble yet confident way when that question is asked. Okay, now give us the one for the real estate agents, please.
Yeah. And real quick, Tim, I mean, you just nailed something that I just want to just make sure everybody, that's listening really takes home, is that the most of the stuff I've learned has been from my mistakes and my failures, right? Not from like my successes, right? Because like, and so what I would urge everybody to do is like when a loan goes sideways, when you lose a deal, when you lose a referral partner, or you have a tough conversation, like use that as like a way to rewind the film and like have like a really serious conversation with yourself in terms of like what you could have done differently. I know almost immediately when I have some sort of setback, like what I could have done. And that's what I think a lot of successful people do. I think a lot of people that aren't as successful or have had challenges kind of take a victim mindset and blame it on somebody else and never rewind the film and kind of see what they could have done differently or hold themselves accountable to it. So like my biggest, like I didn't, there wasn't like this, there's not like this, I don't think there's a better way to learn in this business than having successes and failures and really kind of like using that roadmap that you take away from those lessons and applying them right away for future deals. So like I'm very good at that. Like I tend not to take things very personally, and I just try to step back, look from a little bit of a higher level down on like what I could have done, and try to coach myself through it. I think that's a very important thing that people should take out of this. From a realtor partner standpoint, again, this has like been one of the most trying years ever to be a real estate agent, or maybe the last few years, right? Like there's low inventory, sales are down. You've got this NAR settlement that's been in the media and in their face, and so they're faced with uncertainty. They're faced with challenges, like they're people too, and they've got families to support. They've got goals. They've got their challenges, and so like ultimately, like I'm not looking to be just a vendor, right? Like I'm not just looking to be like somebody with like passing out rate sheets. Okay, like I want to be their partner and I want to be their mentor, right? Like that's kind of like if you were to ask my partners that we work with, whether they're like I'm a part of their team and I'm somebody that adds value to their teams in the sense that like again, I have the solution. So one, I can help them convert their clients at a higher clip than somebody else because of all the work that we've done. Two, I'm somebody that can come in with information that can help them be better for their clients, right? So like I take it for granted at this point that I'm going to crush it from a mortgage standpoint for their clients. Like I'm going to hit their clients with every single tool they need to win in this market, to combat affordability, to understand products, to be confident, like, and to be able to act. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that like when things get, multiple offers, bid over asking, waived contingencies, all these things, people tend to freeze. Well, if you work with me, your clients won't freeze. Your clients are going to be able to take action instead of doing nothing, right? And ultimately, I'm going to create higher conversion for you. Two, I'm going to come in to your office weekly, monthly, in your emails daily, on your social daily, and I'm going to provide you content that you can utilize to be better and to be able to be a better partner. To be able to better advisor for your clients, like so you can nurture your clients better, so you can advise your clients better, so you can feel more confident in what you're doing. So like for me, it's just being a mentor, advisor, and a coach, not just a vendor. I don't want them to look at me as like, oh, my mortgage guy. Like it's like I'm not like very rarely am I ever talking about like here's how great my rates are. Like I'm always leading with like information that they can go out. And one of the things I said at Mastermind, which I live by, is education attracts, information motivates. And that's what I want my partners, like when you educate, when you're putting out great content, when you're coaching, training, informing, right, you're attracting the right kind of partners, right? And I'm very blessed that I work with like amazing, most of my business is from real estate agents. And I work with some really amazing real estate agents because of the value that I offer, I attract really amazing people, right? And earlier in my career, where I was a little bit like less confident, I wasn't as mature as I am today. Like I've learned a lot in the last 20 years. I was like rates, just like I'd work with anybody, right? And it was like I was attracting not always the best partners. And so like now, because I've kind of really honed in my value proposition and what I believe in, and I'm confident in it, I work with some really awesome people. And when you work with really awesome people, it's easy to have success because you're willing to do whatever it takes for them, and they're willing to do whatever it takes for you. And then when I say information motivates, a couple times during this call already, I've said informed, empowered, confident, and I'm talking about my clients. I'm talking about my realtors. I'm talking about myself. When you inform, you motivate people into action. And, there's so many tools out there. There's rent versus own analysis. There's tools that you can show people about appreciation in the future. Like there's ways you can structure loans so you can show them a bunch of different ways in which they can obtain financing to make their dreams of homeownership come through, or whether it's through investing in real estate. But so many people, like everybody has access to the tools and platforms and all that kind of stuff. It's a very small percentage of people that actually use them. But those small percentage of people that use them, their clients are the ones that are out there winning because they're motivated to act. They get it. They understand it. It's not just like a theory to them. It's like you make it like very simple and practical. Like one of my gifts, like the feedback I always get is like, at first I used to kind of be offended by it. Now I think it's a gift. Is like you explain things very simply. right? Like I don't like come over the top on my clients and like bore them to death or like a math professor. Like I just try to make things like very simple and easy for them to understand so they can take it into action. Whereas like when you're over somebody's head, you lose them and they don't even know what the hell you're talking about and they're bored.
Mhm.
So like, so bottom line is my clients are informed, so they're motivated. And when stuff gets hard, which the market's been hard for a couple of years now, right? They're taking action. So that my realtors know that. Like if I connect them with Shant, right? Like my clients are prepared in this market. Whereas if I connect them with somebody else or let them find somebody on their own, like when stuff gets hard, when they have to make a decision, they're stressed out and they're not doing anything. And if you're not doing anything, you're losing.
So you had said a little earlier in the construct of being licensed in all 50 states that you wanted to be easy to refer, which
Yep.
I think is a very important thing to unpack a little bit more beyond that of just the licensing. And you've also mentioned that you have an intention to develop likability and trust, which makes you easy to refer, by the way,
Yeah.
which is why I'm tying the two together. It's hard to refer somebody. I think that it's kind of shocking how people don't get this. It's hard to refer somebody that you don't like or don't trust. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, because then you're going to be worried about whether that person's going to make you look bad, right? So it's like,
Totally.
this is the precursor to being referable, is to be likable and trustworthy. If you could concisely articulate your viewpoint on how to develop likability and trust for those that are listening, like what's Shant's philosophy on how to go about that as early on in the relationship as possible?
Whether it's your partners or your clients, ultimately understand, like I try to, one, have some commonality with my clients, but really more importantly, like they know almost the first things out of my mouth, whether it's with a realtor or a client, is, so tell me about what your goals are, right? Like they know that I'm immediately interested in finding out why they're here today, whether it's a client on the phone or whether it's somebody here, like whether it's a real estate agent, like tell me where you're at with your career, tell me about your family, tell me where you're looking to go, where you've been. With a client, it's like, why is it important to you right now? Like, where do you want to end up? Why is now important? What are your goals in the future? And I just find that the more you can learn about people and you actually show like a genuine interest in understanding where they're at and seeking to understand, then they immediately like you. Like if you're just talking at people the whole time,
Mhm.
like they're like, this person's just like everybody else. He's just a salesperson, right? So like, so in a concise way, that would be the most. I immediately try to find out as much as I can about why people are where they're at, and I try to meet them there.
Great answer. And I think it could be slightly confusing, I would imagine, to anybody who picked up on your statement early on, which was you have a very strong intention about driving the conversation down a certain path, which, by the way, I can't agree with you more. That's one, sales 101 in my mind, is that, like, look, I know what they need to be taught, and I need to take them through my system of me showing my value proposition. If I leave it up to them to ask me the questions that I need them to ask, it's probably not going to happen. So just to clarify the confusion and for you to verify this, it's kind of a combo of starting with creating that likability and trust by showing that you care and asking them a lot of open-ended questions and getting them to open up to you. And from there, taking that information and driving them through your process of how you present yourself and the value that you bring. Is that accurate?
100%.
Yeah, and I think that Shant, I think it's so shocking as to how few loan originators really actually have a system for selling themselves that kind of models that. But to me, that's where the difference maker is, right? So there's something I've been struggling with during this conversation. So I'm gonna ask you now, which is this notion of your value proposition in part being to always be available, to, like, I'm always here for you. I'll take your calls. And how does one, and you might need to answer the way your team is structured, which is another question that I have anyway. And obviously we did a gigantic, like we just Evel Knievel it over the Grand Canyon. For those of you who are old enough to remember who Evel Knievel was, in the sense that we went from like 2008 when you started your own, mortgage company to, 900 units year to date. And there's obviously a huge ravine that takes place in there, but we only have so much time, right? And so how do you make yourself available to all of these people as consistently as you would like to, and yet still have a life and have some balance in your life and be able to spend time with your three daughters and your wife and all of that?
Yeah. So, great question. Um, so early on in my career, going back to 2008, one of there was a lot of like good stuff that I learned from that time, and there was some bad things too, right? Like the bad things were, I had the business ripped out from underneath me in a moment's notice. Like I was on top of the world doing great, and all of a sudden it disappeared. And then for like a year or two, it was extremely difficult. Like, you remember like every single day there'd be two or three mortgage companies shutting down. There was like websites that would like talk about. So like there was a lot of like, and I was young, like I was in my 20s when all that was going on, right? So like that was like built into my core. So one of the things that I struggled to do early on was probably hire because I was afraid to take on. I was always worried that like that was going to happen again, and I was so that was one of the things that like I struggled with, and I tried to do everything myself. Um, and I realized pretty quickly that that was like impossible. And unfortunately, I wore the badge of honor that now I talk to loan officers about not to wear, is that like everybody wants me. I have to do everything. I'm a control freak. And it was like so dumb now that I look back at it, but like that's what it was. Like, if I admit it. So, but so back then I was doing everything. When I say like I was always on, like I was always on. Like Sunday, Saturday, night, morning, whatever. If you called me, like I was on it. And like, look, I'm not afraid to work. I was like, 80, 90 hours a week for years, right? And like I was like on a mission. But that changes as your life changes, right? If you want to be happy in something other than just work, right? Like, as I got married, had kids, all that kind of stuff, I realized like, look, like I don't want to just be like this great loan officer that makes money. Like I want to also have like a fulfilled, happy life and show up for the people that like, that have always showed up for me. So as I started to hire team members, we've built like really great efficiencies in systems. So like, for example, on the weekends, generally speaking, we always have like 2 to 3 people covering every single weekend, so that like truly like every email that comes in over the weekend is responded to immediately. Every call that comes in is responded to immediately. Every pre-approval request, new client, all handled. Like it's all systematic. At nighttime, we have coverage till 10 p.m. every single night. So like literally I wake up in the morning and there's like only the emails that came in are the ones that came in from 10 p.m. and I'm answering those things pretty early just to kind of clean it up. But like, so I've invested that money in myself because like I didn't want to be that person anymore. Like I didn't want to, and I work just as hard as I did back then, but like I'm just like I do it more structured, more rigid. I was also afraid early on, and I don't know if afraid was like, I don't know if it was like a little bit of like a fear of scarcity, right? Because of what had happened. Like I thought like I would just be available whenever clients needed me. Now I'm a lot more confident. And I just realized that like if, when a client's like, hey, can we have an appointment tonight at 9 p.m.? And I say, no, that doesn't work for me. How's 5 or 4 or tomorrow morning at 8:30? Like they're likely to be, okay, that works. Whereas before I thought like you couldn't do that. Right. And that's
Yeah.
a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm also a lot more confident. But yeah, we're always on. Like just like I'm licensed in 50 states, like I advertise that we're on 24/7, 7 days a week because it's the simplicity of message. I send an email out to my entire database every single Friday that says, hey, we're open for business on weekends, on holidays, whenever. Like you need us. Like I just want it to be simple. Like call Shant. He's going to take care of it. There's never a time where they're closed. And people know that we have coverage and we are available anywhere. So 24/7, anywhere, anytime.
So how many people do you have on your team total?
So between the whole situation, like operations, sales support, marketing, biz dev, we're at like 26 people. So
Okay.
yeah.
And how many of those are people are like what you would call an LOA or a junior loan officer, people that cover for you when you're, hey, you have downtime and you're with your
Yeah,
family?
no, great. Yeah. So we have 9 people that support our business, and half of them would be LOAs, and the other half would be like inside loan officers.
So what I heard here that I think is really cool is that there's this early version of Shant who I can relate very much to, who I was very much like as a loan originator as well. I mean, I'm a little older than you, so this will date me, but I'd be, I'd be pulling over to the side of the road at 8:30 at night with the Thomas guide, trying to figure out where this person's house was because I was wanting to take their application at their house. And then I finally made the transition to realizing that no, I can have balance in my life, that I'm making up a story, that's how the business needs to be done, that I could simply give the person alternative options to meet me at 4 o'clock or 7 in the morning before they go to work or whatever I deem to be my working hours. And people would just roll over and accept. But there's this tenacity that is this underpinning of this entire conversation, that is the young man who would drive to New Jersey and then talk somebody into letting him start his own branch in a 2008 market where nobody was expanding, and then that carried that over into being this man who was devoted to working the 80 or 90 hours a week, who then finally figured out I can still have the same tenacity, but we can have that tenacity as a team, and therefore continue to embody that same mentality of we're going to really be there and outwork everybody, but do it in a systemized and organized way to where it wasn't taxing any one individual so severely. So I have a huge question that I'm feeling is going to take a little time for you to answer, which I'm looking forward to hearing. But before I ask it, I have one quick question, which is that I don't know who I heard this from. Somebody had told me that you had done an interview in the past and that you were asked how many basis points you make per loan, and I think you had said 65 is what I remember from the story, and that your response was something along the lines of 65 basis points on $1 billion in production or whatever is plenty of money for me. I don't need any more than that. So I'm going to ask you the question. I don't know if that's a fable, that's a rumor running around.
That's definitely not true. I would never have answered that question on a podcast or anything like that. I definitely I don't remember that. I definitely wouldn't have answered that question though.
Well, so does that mean you won't answer the question if I ask you right now?
Yeah, I don't like getting into compensation, all that kind of stuff, and like these type of formats and where stuff lives forever. It's just not something I'm comfortable with doing.
Cool. Can I ask? I'm going to ask a question in a slightly different way, and if it's still uncomfortable, totally cool.
What probably happened was somebody said, like, hey, can you get into like how much money you made? I think somebody asked me that one time at like a Housing Wire conference. And I was like, I did $1.7 billion. You can probably make up some math and I'm pretty happy with that. I probably answered it that way. Some sort of terse response.
Gotcha. So the question, and I'm going to try to be very refined in it. I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who does 3 deals a month right now. And they're looking at you going like, I don't even like this guy's on a totally different planet. Okay. Did you get there in any way by being the low cost leader? And if so, there's no shame in that because you make it up with volume. But I'm curious, is it low cost as a part of the value proposition? Or was it these things that you shared earlier that you're doing and being true partners to your real estate partners and sending them content and all of that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. That's a really great question. So I've always been kind of like priced, so I always see back to Massachusetts, like, we have some really stiff competition here. You kind of, and then even within like, when I first came to Guaranteed Rate, I learned a lot about, so when I first came from like Superior Mortgage, right? We were like a net branch model there, right? And this is before LO comp rules changed. So you could price kind of like whatever back then. And then when I got here, I realized when I first got to Guaranteed Rate, I was doing $50 million and there was all these people doing 300 million, not all these people, but there's a few people doing 300 million, 400 million, a bunch of people doing $100 million. And my mind was blown about like how these people could do that kind of volume. And so what I did.
What year was that?
This is in 2012 is when I first.
Okay, so in 2012, you were blown away. This is important. You were blown away by the person doing 100 million and going, how could that be possible? Here we are 12 years later and you've got multiples over that. Keep going.
Yeah. And so what I did was I got in line with I've never been the lowest cost in the market ever. I've always been kind of priced with I'm priced very much in line with like where I need to be, because like when you have a team model, when you have all these people and you have expenses and all that kind of stuff, like it doesn't work if you're low cost. Like you have a business, like you have to pay your bills, right? So, bottom line is like, I'm always priced like fairly in the market, and I trust that my value proposition is going to be what separates me if the pricing's close, right? Like I'm never the one like undercutting the whole market. It just, I wouldn't be able to have a staff. Like it's very hard to maintain like, marketing support, branding support, all the events that we do, all that kind of stuff. Like I need to have revenue and profit, right? So to be able to pay for all those things. So no, I've never been that person where like I'm just like a rate sheet lender, just like do it that way. I've always been kind of like priced in line with like, if I'm probably priced in line with like where 90% of my company's price. There might be some people a little bit lower, but there might be some people higher, but like everybody's kind of like generally in the right same ballpark. So no, I've never been, but what I did find is that by being really competitive from a price standpoint required me to do more volume. And so by doing more volume, that allows me to generate more resources to do all the stuff we're doing, marketing, branding, events, and hire people. The difference maker for me has been all the extra stuff I'm doing. Like if you watch me, if you're ever like paying attention to our social media or anything, you can see that like literally we're out every single day in front of our partners and in front of our clients. Like every single day we're doing events, sometimes huge ones, sometimes small ones, a lot more often than not small ones. But the big ones are really big. And it's purely based on like the activities, the actions, and then all the other stuff we're doing. Like we're running it like a real business. And I don't know a lot of really successful businesses that have the lowest margins that like really crush it. So to answer that, that's how it is.
And I don't know a lot of successful businesses that don't understand that it's important to reinvest into business development and marketing, which is exactly what you're describing that you're doing. I mean, what I'm really hearing here is that you built a team around you that allows for you to do what you're best suited to do, which is to be out there making it rain and leveraging the context that you've taken time to develop over the years. So the question that I have is I'm going to ask you to coach for a minute everybody that's listening that's doing, say, 5 deals a month or less, as to what you think that they specifically should be doing right now. And I realized what you said earlier was that you don't have one formula. And I agree with you that everybody's got different personalities and strengths and weaknesses. But what would be some of the important things to do right now in today's market? And hopefully what that's going to do is answer the other question that I had, but I don't know that we have time for both, which was what happened between 2008 and say 2020. There was a lot that happened in that cavern that we talked about that you learned and grew from and leveraged and figured out. So hopefully that's a little bit of part of this answer to the question that I'm asking.
Yeah. No, great. All right. So for the people that are doing like, 1 to 5 loans a month, right? The basics are the basics because they work. Right. And so like, you got to just like, so whoever your mentor is, your coach is, if it's this podcast right here, right? If you're doing 1 to 5 loans a month, you have all the time in the world, right, to increase your activity, right? Like, so every single day, if I was trying to build a business, like when I did, I'd be having at minimum 3 meetings a day, right? And when I mean 3 meetings a day, like I'm meeting with, if I'm doing 1 to 5 loans a month, like that's literally like call that 10 hours of activity total to close, like to communicate, all that kind of stuff. Like there's 40 hours a week, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, whatever you want it to be. Like you have there's so much more time in your day. So the amount of, I would start with three basic meetings a day, whether it's with financial planners or realtors like that. Low hanging fruit, that's where I'm going. Right. So I'm doing 3 of those a day. It's 15 a week. That's 60 over the course of a month. Now, obviously to get those meetings, you've got to be picking up the phone and calling and setting up appointments and asking people in your network to make those meetings happen. Now, if you're not comfortable doing that, then you can go to BNI's. And these are all the things that I did, by the way. This is like, I'm going back to 2008.
Yeah.
BNI's, Chamber of Commerce, Rotary clubs, networking events. Like I'm finding if I don't have those meetings to have, then I'm going to where those people are and then generating the meetings from those places. Now back then, social media wasn't what it is today. I'd be posting every single day on social media. I'd be sending out email blasts to everybody that, getting email databases and realtors and like contact information. If you're posting like good content for people to either visually watch, listen to, or read.
Can you just real quick define, sorry to interrupt your flow,
Yeah.
but can you define what good content looks like to you? Because you've mentioned it a couple of times and I didn't want to stop you, but just for everybody's benefit, what might, give me one example or two examples of what that might look
So
like.
so every single day I'm reading, whether it's, there's so many different platforms out there, but whether you're on Redfin, Zillow, Wall Street Journal, whether you're on one of the different mortgage platforms out there that are providing content in terms of like what's going on in the market. Like I'm getting educated in terms of all the stuff that's happening in real estate and mortgage. And then I kind of take it and try to communicate it back out in a simple format, right? Like, or some of my tools or some of the things that I find interesting that are authentic to me. So like I'm scouring social media and the internet for information. I take it in things that I find most interesting. I kind of regurgitate it back out to people. Now you could do it that way. You could, I just find that stuff about like product and rates and stuff like that doesn't perform very well. So like that's boring and that sounds like people just delete that stuff. So like people want kind of the news. I want to be the news, right? And I want to pierce through all the noise. Like there's a lot of noise out there. I want to be their news source for mortgage, for housing, for real estate. Like when and so that's what's happened. Like I can't tell you the amount of people that I'll get on the phone with them. I'll be introduced to them from a friend, family member, or realtor. And they'll be like, I've been watching your stuff for years. I already know who you are. And it's because we've been putting content out via our email, social, and platforms. So that's how I would do it. So I would be posting every single day. I'd be sending out email blasts every single day. I'd be attending good old fashioned networking events. Like it's limitless. I'd be going to, if you want to get real old school, like if I was really starting out, like, the real estate, I was a member of the Greater Boston Association of Realtors. I still am. I'm going to an event just in a couple of weeks. I was a member of the Mass Association of Realtors. Like all these places have events, and all those places that have those events are surrounded by hundreds or thousands of real estate agents that attend those places. So like you want to go where your partners and clients are, right? Like it's that simple. But you have to be consistent. So like I personally believe, like I've coached a lot of loan officers that have just gotten started. My old school philosophy is always like, if you have 3 meetings a day, 15 a week, 60 a month, you're going to be way busier, faster than you thought. But you've got to put the work in to consistently have those 3 meetings. And it just because you have 1 week of 15 meetings or 2 weeks of 15 meetings, you can't pull it back because then your numbers will start to pull back. Now, I also, like I said, face-to-face contact, old school, email, database, and social media. Like if you just hit those 3 things, if you send out an email a day to your database, if you have 3 meetings a day and you post on social media once a day, you will be very, very busy. And if somebody says to me, well, I don't have the time to do that, I would call BS all day long, because if you're closing 1 to 5 loans a day, I don't even know what the heck you're doing with the rest of your time. Like I can't.
Yeah, they're buried in their files and they're working on things that they shouldn't be working on. I mean, you heard me say this in Vegas. I mean, it's a simple formula. You just need to be talking to people who need to borrow money and people that can refer you to people that need to borrow money. I mean, that's it. I mean, we could summarize this entire 1 hour so far based upon that, because those are the things you started doing day one in the call center, was you started talking to people who needed to borrow money. So let me conclude, and thank you so much for your time, man. I feel like we could do 5 more interviews, by the way, because I have a lot more questions, but I know how busy you are. So I want to conclude with a personal question, which is, what do you need to work on right now as either a business person or a father slash husband, that would make you more well-rounded and significant in your life?
Yeah, great question. I just got to be more present, to be honest with you. Like whether it's personally or professionally, right? Like it's like I'm going fast in all things. Like I have 3 young kids, and I have a really successful business that's like we're pushing really hard. And one of the things I said at Mortgage Executive, at Mastermind, was like when the business came down 50% from 2021 to 2022, and then another 50% last year, I'm sorry, 2022 to 23 and 23 to 24, like I put more resources into it. So like, sometimes I just got to slow things down and evaluate a little bit more. We have a lot of stopgaps in place at work to like, totally make sure we're having our meetings and checking in and accountability and all that stuff. But like, sometimes I just got to take some like quiet time and just be like, all right, here's the things I don't need to work on, and just be a little bit more focused there. And just at home, like, it's like we're in that crazy part of life where we're always going, like when we're at home, it's not like we're just chilling out on the couch. Like one kid's going to one hockey game, lacrosse practice, field hockey, friends, all that kind of stuff. So like sometimes just kind of like a little bit more rest and recharge. I think I'm starting to value that stuff a little bit more than I used to in the past. So that's something that I'm actively working on right now. Is like I'm finding that I used to think like I was like, just go. If you just go full out hard work, effort all the time, that's when like the ideas will come. And I'm starting to realize that like in some of my quiet time and when I'm most rested and recharged, like I come up with some of my best ideas. And so I'm starting to kind of prioritize that a little bit more, and I'm seeing that it actually works, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. So this is actually my first podcast in my new recording studio here in Costa Rica that we're talking
Oh,
from.
wow.
And I've been coming here for 17 years. I own a home here and I do retreats here. And over the years, as I have ramped up the amount of time that I spend down here, which is now 3, 4 months out of the year, I realize that I am a much more creative and intuitive person when I'm here. And the reason is because I get up really early here. I go for a walk on the beach. I'm in nature. I kind of slow my mind down. And then all of a sudden they start getting all these crazy downloads, man, like just like great ideas, like just drop in. As soon as I like kind of clear myself from the mental clutter of like the chaos of everyday life and being busy, 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 it's like I'm actually able to receive like wisdom that can just come in. I know that sounds a little esoteric, but that's how it is. And it's why I've been doing my retreats down here for 13 years. And people ask me sometimes like, well, why do you do your retreats in Costa Rica? And I'll be like, well, you've never been to Costa Rica apparently, because like that is the perfect place to do a retreat, because when I can get people off the grid and into a quieter, more present state, that's actually when they come up with some of their greatest ideas and that can catapult their business and their life to another level. So I want to validate what you're experiencing. I find it to be not only true for me, but true for many other people. So I'm really glad that I asked you that question. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask that you can think about?
I would say you did ask it, but then we kind of got somewhere else. You said, "Why am I the way I am?"
Yeah.
I would say this. My parents moved to this country in the '70s. They both, I was the first one born here in the United States.
Where did they move from?
We're Armenian, so
Okay.
we're kind of spread out across the Middle East. But my mother came here from Lebanon. My dad came here from Iraq. They met here in the late '70s, both kind of leaving like war-torn countries, even back in those times. Kind of same deal
Yeah.
as I think a lot of things don't change, right? So like, but I will tell you that like they had it a lot harder than I did, right? In terms of like coming to this country, having to kind of start from scratch and build like a really amazing life. So like I've always had an appreciation for the opportunity that is present here, right? And like I also because I think of that, and I think my parents did a good job of like doing a good job, and I probably didn't realize it at the time, of like helping me kind of keep things in perspective at all times. And like that really helped me over the course of the last couple of years. It helped me over the course of like 2008. It's helped me my whole life. That like, hey, like this isn't really hard, right? Like even though it's hard, like there's other kinds of hard that are like devastating, right? This is just like challenging, right? And so like having that perspective is always there. That's been important. Understanding and being grateful for the opportunity that's present has also been something that I was gifted to from them. That like I never took any of this stuff for granted, but I also understood that like it was all about like just putting the effort in. So like I kind of owe a lot of my success to like that kind of upbringing of like just having that is like foundationally important to me. And so like people are always like, well, why do you work this hard? Like, do you really even need to do this? Like, I'm working just as hard. I'm just smarter and more efficient than I was before. But like, why are you going this hard? And I'm like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. Like, this is business. It's sport, right? It's like, it's supposed to be challenging. It's never supposed to be easy. It's not going to be easy next year. We're just going to have there's going to be different challenges next year, the year after that, I think everybody's waiting for like this perfect market. And you've been doing this a little bit longer than I have. Like, I don't know if there is like a perfect market. Like 2021 and 2020 were hard too. They were extremely hard. Like,
yeah, everybody was complaining that they were working in their pajamas until 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, like every year has been hard for a different reason. So like I've stopped like waiting for like that perfect market. Like I just treat every market for what it is. There's opportunity in every market. There's obstacles and challenges, and if you can be the solution, you're always going to be all right. And so like I love this business. I'm fortunate. I'm so grateful that I found it. Like nobody wakes up dreaming to become a loan officer, right? Or in the mortgage business. I don't think, anyways. But I'm grateful for it. And so I think that's one of the reasons I'm successful. So like there's a lot of people out there with negative energy, with negative vibes, and like you just got to separate yourself from it and attract to the positive ones and the people with the right perspective. And I think it's very important. I've also been more selective in terms of like who my circle is and who I surround myself with. And that's been also massively important to me. So like, if there's something you can take out of there, and one thing I've learned, one of the things I'm going to work on, Tim, is I've got to become way more articulate. Like you're a master with, communicating, and I picked up on that. Like, so I'll put that on for next year. But, there's some stuff there in terms of perspective, opportunity, gratefulness, positivity. That stuff is like most of the successful people I know have all of that in them. There's not a lot of really successful people that are like super negative and like ungrateful and don't see the opportunity. Like most of the successful people I know, a lot of them are like, there's a lot of that mixed in there.
Yeah, that is a common denominator. Thank you for the compliment. By the way, I doubt there's anybody that's listened to this that would peg you as being inarticulate. I mean, I think far from it. I would imagine, one thing that I want to comment on is I would really imagine that your mother and father are very proud of you.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
That's super cool to hear. That background. I'm glad that I asked you that. Thank you so much, man, for the gift of your time. And I know how valuable it is. And
I'm glad we finally met.
Yeah, for sure. It's like been way too long, man. And I hope that we can continue to get to know each other.
For sure.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. We'll have another one for you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.